Most first-generation millionaires in the $1 million to $10 million bracket have 2 or 3 income-producing investments in their portfolio. The rest looks exactly like mine did 14 years ago, over-concentrated in growth stocks. That works when the markets are ripping, but not so much when your goal is to live off of what your portfolio generates. I'm Christopher Nelson. I run a micro-family office, and my income portfolio currently generates around $200,000 per year in tax-efficient income across multiple asset types. In this video, I'm going to lay out every income investment option available to you and rank them from best to worst, starting with the context that makes this ranking work. Let's anchor this around a specific situation. For this video, let's say our persona has $5 million in investable assets, is retiring in 5 years, historically was almost entirely in growth stocks, and they want most of the capital to remain semi-liquid. That situation drives how I'll grade these. Our persona is concerned with how quickly can you get up to speed on this vehicle? What yield does it generate, and how liquid is it? The grades run S through F. S is the highest fit for this investor. F means our persona should avoid it. If your situation is different, longer timeline, more private market experience, some grades shift. I'll try and flag that as we go. Before we rank anything, one concept, what we call the evergreen model. Most people retire with a drawdown portfolio where you sell assets to fund your life and the pile slowly shrinks. An evergreen portfolio generates income without depleting principal. You live off of what it produces. The principal stays intact and can still grow. To build one, you need 3 asset categories: growth, capital preservation, and income. Most investors are heavy in growth, in capital preservation, and light in income. And the income bucket is where all 15 of these vehicles live, so let's rank them. Now, quick reminder, this is education, not investing advice. I want you to learn the concepts, not just cut and paste the portfolio structure. All right, first up, annuities. Someone has probably pitched you one. Technically, annuities are income vehicles. They can work in very specific longevity scenarios, but fee structures are often opaque. Surrender charges trap your capital for years, and yields rarely compete with a properly built income portfolio. The complexity isn't worth what you give up in flexibility and yield. Annuities, they get an F. Next, high yield savings, money market, and T-bills. These are paying 3 to 4.5% right now with near zero risk and full liquidity. T-bills get a bonus. The interest is exempt from state and local taxes, safe, accessible, and essential as dry powder. But for somebody retiring in 5 years with $5 million, you need yield that beats this without taking on dramatically more risk. This is where you park your capital while you build, not where you build. The grade here is a B. Next up, covered call ETFs. If you've been in growth stocks, you already have a basic understanding of how the market operates. A covered call ETF holds a basket of stocks, like the S&P 500, and sells call options against those positions. The option premiums create income on top of dividends, often 8 to 15% yield, sometimes 20% and above. The yield is dramatically higher than dividend ETFs, but you miss out on some appreciation potential because you're capped at the strike price of the options sold. And these trade on public markets, so they are fully liquid. Now, a quick tax note. Some covered call ETFs use index options that qualify for 60/40 tax treatment under Section 1256 of the tax code, which can be more favorable than ordinary income. The exact profile depends on the specific ETF. So for someone transitioning from pure growth stocks to income, this is the cleanest on-ramp of the entire list. Covered call ETFs gets the S. And if you want to understand the mechanism of covered call ETFs, I made a video diving deep into how they work. I'll link it in the description and at the end of the video. Now let's move on to dividend aristocrat stocks. I give these an A. These are individual blue chip companies with 25 plus year track records of consecutive dividend increases. Yields run 2 to 4%. Most of these dividends are qualified, meaning they're taxed at long-term capital gains rates rather than ordinary income. So why an A and not an S? Well, concentration risk and yield. Owning individual companies means more concentration than a diversified ETF, and the yield, while it is reliable, is modest for somebody with a 5-year retirement window who needs the portfolio to work harder. This is bedrock, reliable, tax efficient, fully liquid, but it's a foundation piece, not a workhorse. Next one, you have probably seen tons of other YouTube videos promoting. Real estate syndications. Syndications are private investments where a sponsor acquires a property, raises capital from accredited investors, and operates on their behalf. Cash on cash yields of 6 to 10% are normal, plus a share of appreciation at sale. Now on paper, that looks attractive. But two things break this for our persona. One, you're often locked in for 3 to 7 years. That breaks the semi-liquid requirement. Two, syndications carry concentrated single asset risk. You're not diversified across the portfolio of properties. You're tied to one investment, one operator, one market. Now, done well, the returns can be excellent. Done poorly, you can lose principal entirely, and evaluating a sponsor takes real experience that somebody new to private markets hasn't built yet. Now, if you have a longer timeline in private market experience, this grade goes up. But for our persona, I've got to give it a D. Next are REITs, real estate investment trusts. I give these a B. Now, REITs are how you get real estate exposure without owning the property. Yields run 4 to 8%. They trade on public exchanges, so you have full liquidity. REITs are required to distribute at least 90% of taxable income, which supports the higher payouts. But most distributions are taxed as ordinary income rather than qualified dividends. So account placement matters. REITs work very well in tax advantage accounts like IRAs, Roths, but less well in taxable accounts at higher tax brackets. So for our persona, this is a strong fit, real estate diversification without the lockup of syndications. Now back to equity income. In a grade higher than REITs, high yield dividend ETFs earn an A. They're similar to dividend growth ETFs, but optimized for current yield rather than dividend growth. The companies inside may not have 25-year track records, but they're paying more today. Slightly more volatility, but more income and still fully liquid. For someone 5 years from retirement, the higher current yield matters. Now, private credit in hard money lending. This is direct lending outside the banking system, where accredited investors access yields that don't exist in public markets. You're looking at 10 to 15% from real loans being repaid. It's the yield that gets attention. But here's the reality for our persona. Capital is often locked up, and the due diligence required is significant. You're evaluating loan portfolios, underwriting standards, the people running the fund. The risk isn't market risk. These don't move with the stock market. The risk is credit risk and liquidity risk, and both require experience to evaluate well. So for an experienced investor with private market chops in a longer timeline, this grade goes much higher. But for someone transitioning out of growth stocks 5 years from retirement, private credit gets a D. Now, on the simpler end of fixed income, tax-efficient bonds land at a B. High-quality municipal bonds today often yield about 3 to 5% federal tax-free. In many cases, state tax-free if you buy bonds issued in your own state. For someone in the 37% tax bracket, a 4% muni yield is roughly equivalent to a 6.3% taxable yield. Some newer bond strategies layer in covered calls to push combined yield to 5 to 6% with a tax-efficient mix. Now, these are reliable, tax advantage, and liquid. The watch out is interest rate sensitivity. Bond prices move when rates move. I give this a solid B. Next up is a step up in complexity from bonds, MLPs or master limited partnerships. MLPs are primarily energy infrastructure businesses, pipelines, storage, processing, structured as a pass-through partnership. Yields run 5 to 8% with exchange-traded liquidity and often tax-advantaged distributions. Now, I give these a C rating. Why a C? Comes down to complexity. MLPs come with K-1 reporting at tax time, which is more involved than the 1099 most investors are used to. And held inside of an IRA, MLPs can trigger UBTI or unrelated business taxable income, which creates tax issues in accounts that are supposed to be tax deferred. The yields are real, but the mechanics require a little bit more effort to understand before you invest. Now, back to straightforward equity income. Dividend growth ETFs earn an A. These hold companies with long histories of paying and increasing dividends. Yields are modest, 2 to 4%, but the focus is on consistent dividend growth across recession and market shocks. Many of these dividends are qualified, so they're taxed at lower long-term capital gains rates for most investors. Diversified, fully liquid, easy to understand. This is a solid A for our investors' criteria. Now, let's move into private equity real estate funds. Unlike syndications, these funds are diversified across the portfolio of properties or real estate loans rather than a single investment. These provide more diversification than a syndication, but also less liquidity than a REIT. Some have quarterly liquidity windows, others lock up for years. Cash yield often runs 4 to 8% once the fund is fully invested, with total target returns in the mid-single to low double-digit. Now, I give these a C grade because the lockup pressures the semi-liquid requirement. The diversification, though, makes it a stronger play than syndications, but the liquidity profile keeps it middle of the pack for this situation. If you had a longer timeline, this grade would go up. Now, moving on, the next one is also a C, but with a completely different mechanism. We're talking about BDCs, or business development companies. BDCs provide higher yielding loans to small and mid-sized companies, then distribute most of their taxable income to shareholders. Many publicly traded BDCs yield 8 to 12%. Now, these trade on public markets, so liquidity is fine, but the complexity is on the mechanics side. BDCs use leverage. The loan portfolios concentrate in particular sectors, and distributions are generally taxed as ordinary income. So strong yield, but you need to understand what's inside the fund before you allocate. C is a fair grade for our personas. The next one, most people have never considered from an income perspective: royalties and IP income. Think music catalogs, patents, brand licensing. The income is uncorrelated to stocks and real estate, which is genuinely valuable for diversification, and the concept is interesting. But the market is less mature and due diligence is complex. The knowledge base required to invest effectively here takes years to build. This isn't something most people can take on without lots of prior expertise. For our persona, this is a no and lands in the F category. Not because royalties are bad investments, but because the time required to build competence here does not fit the timeline. And last, preferred stocks. Preferred stocks are a hybrid between bonds and equity. Typically, they give 5 to 7% yields, good liquidity through diversified ETFs. They pay fixed or formula-based dividends that rank ahead of common dividends. So the income is more predictable than common stock dividends. Now, watch outs. Prices are significantly affected by interest rate moves and credit stress. They're not as stable as short-term bonds, and the dividends can still be suspended in distressed scenarios. I give these a C grade for our persona. Useful for income diversification, but rate and credit sensitivity do require attention. So that's the full ranking, all rated through the lens of our $5 million retiree 5 years out with semi-liquid preference and growth stock background. Now, owning more vehicles isn't the same as being diversified. Real diversification with income comes down to 5 dimensions. 1, by income source type. Some income from equity markets, some from real estate, some from interest-bearing instruments. When one source is under pressure, the others aren't necessarily affected. 2, by liquidity profile. Liquid positions give you flexibility. Illiquid positions give you premium yield. So for our persona, the skew runs heavy on the liquid side, but you'll still want some diversification across the spectrum. 3, by operator. In the higher yield illiquid vehicles especially, you're not investing in an asset class. You're investing in the people running it. Never concentrate these positions with a single operator, no matter how strong their track record. And 4, by tax treatment. Some income is taxed at qualified rates, some at ordinary rates, some is tax-free. Where you hold each vehicle matters as much as which vehicle you choose. 5, by interest rate sensitivity. Some assets benefit when rates rise, others get hurt. A portfolio that's sensitive in just one direction creates vulnerability. Now, if you have $1 million to $30 million in net worth and you're actually ready to build your evergreen portfolio, I would love to have you at our next live workshop. It is a 2-hour deep dive on the architect phase of setting up your own microfamily office. You will walk away with a legacy statement, an investment thesis, and a portfolio structure tailored to your goals. And at the time of recording this, we've had over 2,000 people just like you come through this workshop. Head over to wealthops.io/go or click the link below this video to register. Our next workshop is likely just in a few days. Now, after you sign up, I want you to check out this video if you want to learn more about covered call ETFs. Let's keep building.